So the at 8 o'clock, you know the okay, you got to leave. Okay, so we'll do the video later. It's a beautiful night. No, you better after the so we're gonna do the Gemara first, and then we'll do the night video. Stop later. No, just a draft. It feels like it's blowing. The draft. The cold air hits the window and it falls down. It's actually not leaking. Okay. This how it wasn't that all talking about tell your kids like laying in the smell is being cold. Okay. So tonight's shir is being sponsored by Rabbi Victor Hyman and his family. For a schus for a full shalema for Shimon ben Chasia, Rabbi Victor's father, who's in surgery now. Everything should be successful, and he should have a refuah shalema.
Is he in Toronto?
Yeah, Toronto Western.
Amen.
Toronto Western. Fush Lema.
First layman. Where are we?
We are all the way at the bottom of Bays Amud Bays. We're right at the bottom. We actually already got up onto the
Which Masechta?
Moed Katan.
Beautiful. Okay.
Moed Katan. Okay, so here we go. Yesterday we learned, Thursday night we learned that Mishnah discusses that on Shvius, meaning on Shemitah, which is a complete deraisa to do the different agricultural activities, they also have the leniencies of a davar ovid to be mashkin beis hashlochim, like our Mishnah says. So the Gemara challenged that. If it's a regular issue deraisa, the Chachamim can't just willy-nilly say, since it's a davar ovid, you're allowed to do these malachas. It's like saying on Shabbos. On Shabbos, since it's a davar ovid, you can do malachas. Of course, that's not even something that we would consider. So why is it that we find kulas lagabi shmita? So the Gemara first answered that if you follow the sheet of Rebbe, that shmita bisman hazeh is only the Rabbanon. So if it's only a Rabbanon, then the Rabbanon have the right to be mekel when there's a davar ovid. Rava had a second shot, which we learned as well, and he said no. We could even go according to the Rabbanon that shmita even bisman hazeh is an issue daraisa. So then why do the Rabbanim have a right to be lenient with certain agricultural activities? It's because Avos Asar Rachmana told us Loi Asar Rachmana, which takes us just to the top of Daf Gimel Amud, which means we always know that on Shabbos there's Avos Malachas, there's Toldos Malachas. Now the Gemara is telling us that by Shemitah as well, there are Avos and there are Toldos. What are the rules as what are Avos and what are Toldos? We'll get to that. But one thing for sure, mashkin beis hashlochim b'shvius, clearly irrigating. The Gemara here is considering a toldo. It's only also midrabanan, and that's why the Rabbanan have a right to be lenient to allow mashkin beis hashlochim on shvius. So now we need to get an understanding of what are the rules of the game, what are avos and what are toldos. Does it parallel the avos and toldos of Shabbos, or is there a different set of rules for Shemitah? So if we look at the very first Rashi on the Amid, Rashi tells us, Toldos, Kegoyin, Mashkis.
Can you mute everybody? Yosy, can you mute everybody?
I muted the source of the noise. I can see where the source of the noise is, and I'll do whack-a-mole. And as it comes up, I'll mute it. Kegoyin Mashkis Royim. I'm sorry, I didn't react fast enough. Kegoyin Mashkis Royim. That's why I never won any prizes in the X, because I never was able to whack-a-mole fast enough. Kegoyin Mashkis Royim.
You didn't need the prizes from the X. Your father's L'chaim Livracha supplied all the prizes to the X. All the stuffed animals, your father's L'chaim Livracha with your uncle's L'chaim Livracha made the prizes, okay?
I once asked my father, these stuffed animals are expensive. How can they afford to give them away? So my father said, I asked the guy who I sold it to. He says, Mr. Simon, you know how many millions of people pay us before we give one away? Going Mashkes Royim. So Rashi gives us a major clue. Mashkes Royim was a malacha that was not in the Mishkan. Now we know, how do you assess which are malachas for Shabbos and which not? Those that are malachas for Mishkan. So Rashi seems to be saying that the same rules that designate what's a malacha for Shabbos designate what's a malacha for Shemitah. However, Rashi in Shabbos says not like that. And the Marsha asks on Rashi that Rashi holds that it's a completely different set of rules, and the proof is in the pudding. Soon we're going to see Harisha. Charisha is for sure a malacha d'oraisa on Shabbos, but we're going to see that it's not a malacha when it comes to Shvius, to Shemitah. So the Mashra asks Rashi, why are you linking it to Shabbos when in fact even you agree, the Gemara says clearly that those that are Avis Malachas for Shemitah have nothing to do with those that are Avis Malachas for Shabbos, and we'll see later today how you get on the list of Malacha for Shemitah.
So if you're over at the Rabbanan on Shabbos, you don't make a chatas, right? So what would be the kapara?
What is the kapara for being over at Rabbanan?
Yeah.
Like every Rabbanan.
There's no chatas for the Rabbanan.
So well, there's no chatas for it, but there is a variable assessor. I'm not sure what the punishment of being over Rabbanan. I don't know anybody that was ever over at Rabbanan. So I never saw it happen. Okay. Let's see the Heilige Gemara weiter. Okay. So told us L'Asar Rachmana, Dichsiv. Where do you see told us L'Asar Rachmana, Dichsiv? Uvishona Hashvius, Shna Shabbosain, Yil Aretz, Shabbat Shabbosain, Yil Aretz, Tzotlois Israel. So the subject of today's whole Gemara, the Gemara is going to be dissecting this pasuk again and again. So let's read the pasuk inside so that we have clarity with it, so that as we run into the different challenge the Gemara does with the pasuk, we'll already know the pasuk well. So over here, my Torah of Yankee Samsonovich's Gemaras that are donated, a nice fresh Moed Katan Gemaras. It's Geschmack. Every Masech you get a new fresh Gemara. It says Ubashana Hashvius Shabbos Shabbosain Yil Aretz. That would be the mitzvah of Shemitah. It's also a klal. Ubashana Hashvius Shabbos Shabbosain Yil Aretz. There should be a year of Shabbosain, meaning no malachas done. So that would be, I would consider that, the Gemara considers that a klal, but it's also a klal with a mitzvah saseh, right? Shabbos Shabbosain Yil Aretz Shabbos Lashem. So in a mitzvah saseh, there's also a klal here saying that the land must be fallow, must rest. Then we have some pratim, but the pratim are in the form of a lois saseh. Sodcha lois Isra, the kaimacha lois Isma. Now let's just analyze what these activities are. Sodcha lois Isma. One may not plant a field. One may not prune the bad branches, the bad twigs off of the keren. Now, loy sizmar is really zereya, because zereya means anything that enhances, that prompts growth. So whether you're actually planting a seed or whether you're doing something to a tree like pruning it, which will also enhance its growth, those are both zereya. So we have two pratim where the Torah repeats two different versions of zereya that you're not allowed to do. You're not allowed to do zereya of a field, like planting grain, for instance, and you're not allowed to prune a vine, like in a vineyard, which will enhance the growth of the vine. Those are two pratim in a loisha set. Then we have another two pratim. You're not allowed to cut down a grain, so that's called harvesting. That's called reaping. It's an av malacha. That's invein nizirecha loisivtzar. Bitsira is exactly the same thing. It's harvesting a grape. So we again have two pratim in lav form that are really identical to each other, just in different products. And then we have a klal all the way at the end, which is weiter in the lashon of anasei. Shna Shabbos and Yil Aretz. So that is our pasuk. Now let's see how the Gemara is going to extract from this pasuk that there are many derabbanans, only the avos are also to do on Shemitah b'deraisa, but the non-avos are not also b'deraisa, and therefore the rabbanan have the leniency, have the ability to be able to be mat to them where there's a hefsed mood. So Zok the Gemara, it says B'shona Hashaviyis Shabbos Shabbos and Yil Aretz Sot Chalois Israel. Michti, let's think about this for a second. Zemira b'chalal zeriya. Zemira is really zeriya. So pruning a tree, like we mentioned, is really the same thing as planting. It's something that enhances growth. Uvitzira b'chalak tzira, and b'tzira, which is harvesting grapes, is the same thing as harvesting, as cutting down grain. So lamai hilchasa kasvinu rachmana. Why would the Torah repeat itself? The Torah has already given us the information. Lo sizra, lo siksar. We could figure out in similar products their version of zriya would be asr, and their version of tzira would be asr. Since the Torah repeats it and it's completely unnecessary, the Memora teaches us that Hani told us mechayiv, achronai saloi mechayiv. Since the Torah went out of its way to tell us two different prohibitions, that are not necessary, obviously the Torah wants to say it's only these that are usher, or it's only these that you'll be chayav for, and nothing else. So now we know what the others are. The others are Sikzar, Sizmar, Sizra, and Sivtzar. Those are the others, the ones that I mentioned, black and white in the Torah. Everything else is the Midirabana. So therefore,
I don't see that it's extra at all, you see. One is planting, you have something from nothing. You had nothing there before, now you're gonna plant, you have something fresh and new. Pruning is you're dealing with an existing, something already existing, and all you are, as you said, is enhancing it. But the first one, you're creating it. The second one, you're enhancing it. So they're both necessary.
100% they're both necessary, but nevertheless, the Gemara looks at anything that enhances growth is understood as to be Zareah. Even watering a plant is considered Zareah, like we learned earlier. We learned yesterday. We learned Nafbez. Even watering is considered Zareah. So the Gemara looks at it and lumps it all together. You're illustrating a difference, the Metzias, between the two, and maybe Zareah is bigger.
No, so you would have a Havam in it that if you just had one of them, you exclude the other one. So why include everything? Because you have both. If you had one.
I hear it, but you're saying there would be reason to mention Zimur, even though Zareah was mentioned already.
Right.
So, but that's not how the Gemara looks. It's a very good point, but the Gemara doesn't look at it that way, because if we look at the second Rashi on Amud, Zemir b'chal Zerira, Shedagi shel Zomer litzmuche peirei ki Zareah. The outcome, the result of that activity is the same result as the activity as planting. When you plant, it causes pears to grow, and when you prune, it causes pears to grow. So you're saying Zareh is from something from scratch, and this is not. But somehow the Gemara categorizes them as the same.
And the other example of harvesting, one you're harvesting and you're destroying the plant completely, and the other one you're just taking off of the vine. It's going to grow next year anyway. There's a difference.
There's definitely a difference, like what you're pointing out, but the Gemara Vaistachos focuses on the fact that you're getting something, because Katsir always has to mean you're cutting it for a purpose because you want something. So the Gemara seems to say that the focus of the Katsira is what we're taking, not what we're
right. But you're saying that it's extra, but you wouldn't know one from the other. So it isn't extra. So maybe you shouldn't learn a drush out of it.
I hear it. That's a nice word. But what we see from the Gemara is that we only focus on what we're taking. And if we only focus on what we're taking, the Gemara does consider them one and the same. So your svara is good, but the Gemara doesn't hold it.
Okay.
Dave, if you have a hard scroll, look at number 3. It might answer your question.
So what, can someone read it?
Look at number 3 in hard scroll.
Well, Peter, why don't you read it? Kanye the Igrisa.
What? I can't hear you.
Peter, why don't you read it?
Want me to read it?
Please.
Yeah, read it.
You want to hear it? Pruning, which involves cutting off the dried branches from the vine, is a told of sowing because the goal of both activities is to promote plant growth. They both have the same goal. That's why they're very similar.
He's just quoting Rashi.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's Rashi.
Similarly, Katsira, which means harvesting grapes, is a told of Katsira.
I hear. Okay, Zog the Helig Gemara Vayter. No, Avadi, these are good oris. Maybe it's not extra. And as a matter of fact, there are people who argue on this and hold that those are deraisa. So it's not like the Gemara doesn't hold it. The Gemara here doesn't hold of it. But the other Amoraim who actually learn that these are deraisa will agree with you. Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vayter.
Peter, the next few lines would have been important for Dave to hear. Read the next few lines.
Veloy, are you telling me that these malachas are not asur midaraisa? Tanya, I'm going to quote a brisa. That indicates, in fact, that these are asur midaraisa. And the Geshmak about today's Amud is that this brisa that we're quoting is going to be quoted again for the exact same purpose. This brisa proves that some of the malachas are daraisa and not rabbanan, like the Gemara is claiming. So we're going to have this kasha twice. Now we're asking it on the point of the Gemara, where the Gemara is saying now that it's rabbanan. The Gemara is going to say that elsewhere, and we're going to go through the whole thing again. Vatanya, Sad Chaloi Sizra. It says in the pasuk with Sad Chaloi Sizra, the Kama Chaloi Sizra. Ainli Ella Zirua Vizimur. I would only know that these two specific malachos are aser. Minayin l'nichush. How do we know that nichush would be aser? And nichush means to pull weeds out, but it doesn't just mean to pull weeds out, it means to pull them out with their roots, so they're totally uprooted. Uli idor, which Rashi says, that means digging underneath or around the vines to soften up the earth, which helps them grow well. Uli kisuach, which Rashi says is also cutting the weeds off, but not uprooting them, just cutting them off at the surface. Talmud loymar, sotcha loy, karmelcha loy. And we darshan loy kol malacha shebesotcha, v'loy kol malacha shebekarmelcha. We're including all of these as being asur midaraisa. So clearly, they understood the pasuk like Dave Zolti did, that the loisizmar is not extra. And to the contrary, we learn that many other things are asur as well. Minayin, shein mekarsimin, which Rashi says is the same thing as pruning, but it's doing it, instead of doing it on a vine, it's doing it on a tree. Vein mizardin, which Rashi tells us is cutting off both good and bad branches. When you're pruning, you're only cutting off the worn out branches. But mizardin is even cutting good branches, and Mechi suggested that might be is because if you cut off even good branches, then those leaves will not suck nourishment, and it will allow the fruit on the tree to get more nourishment and to grow nicer. Or the ein mefaskin be'ilam, which Rashi says, if you have a soft tree, you sometimes put a stick beside it, and then you fasten the tree to the stick to support it. How do you know you're not allowed to do midaraisa, any of these things? Talmud loymer, the same limud tzad chaloi, karma chaloi, kol malacha shebesat chaloi, loy kol malacha shebesatcha, veloy kol malacha shebekarma. And now we have a third round of items that we want to say are asur deraisa. Minayin shein mezablin, they mefarkin. So mezablin means to put fertilizer on the roots of the tree. Mefarkin, Rashi says, means if there's rocks on the roots of the tree, you take it off. They ma'afkin, and you don't cover roots that happen to be exposed on the ground. You don't cover them over with earth. They ma'ashkin be'ilam, and you're not allowed to smoke a tree. And Rashi says what smoking a tree means is you set up a fumigation below the tree to kill any insects that are in it. There's a lot of Rishonim who argue and say, what's wrong with that? You're not doing anything to improve the tree, you're just killing insects. So they learn if you want to put some medicine into a tree, the arborists would put it into some type of compound that they would burn, and the smoke would get absorbed into the tree, and that's how they would apply that particular remedy to the tree. Talmud loymer sod chaloi, karma chaloi, kol malacha shebesod chaloi, v'chol malacha shebekarma chaloi. So we have three different sets of different activities that the Bryce is prohibiting using the exact same limud. So you might ask, why couldn't we give it all in one long list and you have the same limud? Why did the Tana split this up into three lists? So the Mesivta brings down, he quotes the Rishonim. I didn't look up the Rishonim, I just looked up the Mesivta. Like I said before, why look up the Rishonim if you could look up the Mesivta, right? So the Mesivta says that this Tana heard this conversation in one bris medrash, heard a different conversation in another bris medrash, and a third conversation in a third bris medrash. So he gave it over as he heard it. But in fact, they could have all been wrapped into one klal. And now we're going to get to the part that's mutter. Yochel lo yikashkesh tachas hazeisim. You might think you're not allowed to do kishkush under zeisim, and Rashi, that's idor, which means you're digging up the ground around it to soften it. Except the word idor applies to vines, grapevines, and the word kishkush would be appropriate to do around olive trees. V'lo yeder tachas fanim. You might think you're not allowed to do either. So right away, everybody should jump at me. What do you mean you're not allowed to do either? What do you mean the Bryce is here is going to say you're allowed to do either? We just learned earlier you're not allowed to do either. So let's put that aside for now. You might think you're not allowed to make either. You're not allowed to fill different ditches with water. And you might think you're not allowed to make ugiyos legefanim. Talmud loymar sotchaloi sizra zriya bechal hoisa. We already knew zriya is aser. You know how we knew zriya is aser? Because if you look at the pasuk, once again, the pasuk of Shemitah that we're going to refer to, Uvashana Shavias Shabbos Shabbos and Yila Aret Shabbos Lashem. That already tells you you're not allowed to plant, because Shabbos Lashem means fallow. You're not supposed to plant a field. So why did the Torah have to specify right afterwards Sotchaloi Sisra? It's already Bechlalois. It's in the klal of the Shabbos and Yeh. So why did the Torah specify Zriya? To make a hekesh between Zriya and anything else that we want to say is also. Mazriya miyuchedes avodah shebesad visha bekerem. Just like the malach of Zriya is something that you will do, something that you would do both in a field and in a vineyard, because in both places you could plant. The only type of avodas that are usher on Shemitah are things that apply both to Asada and the Kerem. So if there's something that you would only do in Asada and not in the Kerem, or if there's some type of thing that you would do in the Kerem and not in the Asada, those would not be usher. And the list of items that we just discussed, which the Brisa says would be mutter, such as kishkush, which is done by Zaysim, and Eidur, which is done by Gefanim, and all the rest of the list, they're not done both in a kerem and in a sada, and that's why they're not going to be awesome. But I'll call upon him, after reading this whole brisa, we see a long list of items that are not the 4 items specifically listed in the pasuk: Sizra, Sizmar, Ketzircha, and Siftzar. There's a long list of items that are also usher, and if you read the brisa, it's pretty clear that the brisa is saying it's usher because we learned it out of a pasuk. So how could you say all these malachas are derabanan? You see they're all deraisa. And for the Gemara, no, they're midirabanan. Ukras machtaba alma. That these Tanoim bring a pasuk to support it is not really where they learn it from. It's just on the smachta. It's a signal that supports their derabanan. So therefore, we remain that only those 4 malachas are also deraisa. Everything else is only also midirabanan, and therefore, by a davar ovid, the rabbanan are allowed to be makel and allow those things. Correct Gemara, but kishkush, the shvius mishari, is kishkush allowed on shvius? Oh, I'm sorry. Before we go weiter, I brought up a question, and it's really Rashi's question. And the Brisa says, "Yochalo yikashkush tachas hazeisim v'lo yedar." So the Brisa refers us, you're allowed to make either tachas ekfanim. The problem is earlier in the Brisa, it clearly said that either is usher. It says either is usher. Yet here at the end of the Brisa, it seems to indicate that either is going to be mutter. So what is it? So let's see Rashi. Vim tikshi ha'asr either la'il. How could the Brisa at the end say either is allowed? Didn't the Brisa earlier say that either is usher? Zok Rashi katars lekamon b'ugiyos. When it comes to ugiyos, the Gemara later on makes a distinction between chadati v'atiki. In older ones, you're allowed to do it. I'm sorry, in younger ones, you're allowed to do it because they need strength. They're not so developed yet. And in older ones, you're not allowed to do it because that's larvacha. So the same thing with either. The place where the Brisa says you cannot do either, that's batiki. They don't need it. But the place where the Brisa says you're allowed to do either, that's b'chadati. So Rashi says that they ask it to be something else, so we'll apply the same teretz to either. Frank the Gemara, the kishkush b'shvius mishari, is kishkush allowed? So kishkush once again is digging up the soil around an olive tree to soften it up. Is that allowed? Because the Brisa just said it was allowed. Vaksiv, it says in the pasuk, Vashvius, and on the 7th year on Shemitah, Tishmetana, you should abandon it. And the Tashta, it's another word that means abandonment. And we darshan the pasuk as follows: Tishmetana milakashkish, you should abandon it from doing kishkush. When the Tashta milasakal, you should abandon it from throwing stones that are in the soil around the plant. You're not allowed to throw those stones away. So we have a stira. Is kishkush allowed or is it not allowed? Amar book for Barchama, Trey kishkushe have. There's 2 types of kishkush. Chad avrua ilani. One is going to improve and enhance the tree, which of course is also to do on the Shemitah year. The chad tasumi pili, and one is just misasim b'kaim shel ilan rashes, just plugging the cracks, the splits in the tree to protect it from destruction. Sure. Right. Oh, new ugiyos versus an old ugiyos? Okay, when we get to the Gemara, I'll see. I didn't get to the Gemara yet. So thank you for bringing that up. Did you learn the Gemara already? You learned the Gemara ugiyos? So I defer to Rabbi Yochanan. So how could you have an old either and a new either? What? So how could you have an old either and a new either? How could you have the same answer for either? An old either and a new either? Either is an action. Talk about ugiyos. By ugiyos, it's talking about chadi batiki. And Rashi wants to say the same teretz that the Gemara said later regarding ugiyos I'll say here Lagabi either. But either is not ugas. Either is just softening up the ground.
Yeah, so it's the line.
So what do you mean an old either or a new either? Either is just softening the ground.
Around an existing, more mature
Plant.
plant.
But that's not Rebbe Rechen's correcting. Rebbe Rechen's saying it's not talking about an old plant and a new plant. It's talking about an old ugias and a new ugias. But that teretz wouldn't make sense by either. So let's wait till we get there. We'll wait till we get there and then we'll see. I'm sorry?
As applicable.
Could be. So let's see the Gemara. It's all possible. We don't have to speculate. We'll get there. We'll see. So the Gemara Vayter.
Yes.
So yes.
Isn't there's a machlekes what the watering means, whether it's harisha or whether it's ria. So
No, it's not about what watering means. It's a machlekes what malacha.
What malacha? Okay, excuse me. So machlekes what malacha. So we just spent the last few minutes clarifying that if it means zria, that it's only a drabanan. But if it meant harisha,
Whoa. That's talking about Shabbos, and on Shabbos zriya is a deraisa.
but wouldn't the same argument be when you're on shlius, when you water, whether the watering is called zriya or whether it's called harisha? It's the same
The
watering.
Gemara asked that kasha. The Gemara said, Rabbi Yosef asked that to Rabbah, and he said, if you're going to say that zriya mean that watering is riyan, watering is chayrish and not zereya, because Rabbah said it's chayrish. So what are you going to do by Shemitah? By Shemitah, chayrish is not even also. Wasn't that Rabbi Yosef's kasha to Rabbah?
There's no isser that we don't have a pasuk that says harisha is usher on.
Harisha can't be. Rashi says harisha can't be also by Shvius because harisha is before you plant. I'm sorry. I'm mixing up. It's Klein. I apologize. Rabbi Yosef asks from Klein. I'm sorry. I take it back. I'm sorry. What were you saying? I mixed it up.
I thought that there's an isser of harisha for Shemitah.
Yes, there is. I apologize. There absolutely.
And that would be, and that's written in the Torah, I think, and that's why it would be a deraisa. So we only answer our question if watering is Zriya, but we didn't answer our question if watering is Harisha.
Yeah, but that's like Shabbos. Maybe if there is no Zereya, maybe it would be Charish. Let me think. What are you saying again? You're saying if you hold like Rabbah, that watering is Chayrish and not Zereya, so why is it? So what would be the problem? Say it again.
Harisha is the Raisa. So then you wouldn't be able to say the Heter,
right?
because it's written in the Torah. So it's written, I think it's
It
written in
says
the
the
Torah.
Charish of the Katan Tishbois?
Yeah.
Okay, I hear. Let's wait till the Gemara doctrines that pasuk. So you're bringing in a new thing. It says in the pasuk becharish v'katan tishbois, and if you learn that that's referring to Shemitah, then there's a pasuk that says charish is aser, and based on that, if there's a reis charish, it's going to be aser with the rice. So then how could they be make a lot? That's what your kasha is.
Right.
Okay, very good. Let's keep that in mind, and let's see when we get to the Gemara that discusses that pasuk. I hear what you're saying. Okay, Amar Avok v'Barchama, Trei kishkusha have it. There's two kishkushim. Chad avruya ilane, v'chad sesuma pili. Avruya ilane aser. If you're doing something that's going to enhance the growth of a tree, that's aser. That's not a davar of it. That's for harvaka. Sesuma pili, which is just protecting it from damage. Shari, that would be allowed. Itmar hacharish b'shviyah. So this is the shaila of charisha, because you're telling me that charisha is aser midaraisa. So let's see what the Gemara says about a charish. Itmar hacharish b'shviyas. One who makes charisha on shviyas. Is charisha aser midaraisa or not? You assumed, Rabbi Moshe, that it was, but the Gemara has it for a shaila here. Hacharish b'shviyas. Rabbi Yochanan v'Rabbi Elazar. Chad omer loika. One of the two say it's a deraisa and therefore you'd be chayiv malchus. The chad omer ein loika. But one of them says that it's not a deraisa. So that really should answer your question, at least according to the Mandamot ein loika. It won't be fair. Frank the Gemara, Azak the Gemara, suggests the Gemara, why are they arguing? What is the machloikis? What is the nakuda upon which they're arguing whether or not chayrish is aser midaraisa? Lema b'darav Avin Amar Rabbi Loi committed. Let's say the machloikis hinges on whether or not you agree with what Rabbi Avin said in the name of Rabbi Loi. And what did he say? Amar Rabbi Avin Amar Rabbi Loi. So let's just take a break for 1 second and let's review that pasuk. The pasuk starts off with a klal in an asay. Uvashon hashvius Shabbos Shabbos and Yil Haaretz Shabbos Lashem. We have a klal as an asay, which would include every malacha shall be also, even charisha. Then there's a prat, a series of pratim with a loisese, sadcha loisizra, the chama loisizmar, a svich tzircha loisixer, a imig zerecha loisivtzar. So this is a prat in a loisese form, and then once again a klal shna shabbos and yelaretz. So let's see the Gemara. Rav Avin Amar Beloi says as follows: Kol mokim shnemer klal ba'asei. Whenever the klal is in an asay, uprat b'loisese, which is exactly our pasuk referring to Shemitah, ein donen said b'chlal uprat klal. You wouldn't darshan it as a klal prat klal. Now, if you would darshan it as a klal prat klal, you would say that any malacha that's similar to the ksira and the zriya would be aser, because that's getting a prat. So mandamar loika, the mandamar holds you loika for charisha, less lady rabavin. He holds you do darshan it with a klal prat klal, and we would say that charisha is ke'ena prat. Charisha is similar to zriya. It is similar to ksira because they're all activities that are part of the growth cycle of Paris, and therefore charisha will be aser. And the mandamar umanda amar ena loika, and the mandamar holds you don't come out this is lady rabavin. He holds like rabavin. And he will learn, and this is a chiddush, that you don't darshan the klal prat u klal, but you darshan it as a klal u prat, and ein bechlal elamashe beprat. So then only these four malachas will be aser, but charisha would not be aser. That's how Rashi learns. People are looking at me funny, and I'm assuming why they're looking at me funny for multiple reasons. Because if you hold you don't darshan it bechlal u prat u klal, so then why would you darshan it bechlal u prat? If the problem is that you can't mix a klal that's in an assay with a prat that's in a loisase, so why say it's not a klal prat or klal, but it is a klal prat? But the way Rashi is learning, it's going to be a klal prat, right? Tosfos doesn't like that, and there's another thing Tosfos doesn't like, and that's the next line. That's the next line of the Gemara. Let's say the chulama less like the Rabban Omer Rabbi Loi. Let's say everybody disagrees with Rabban Omer Rabbi Loi, and you have a klal prat or klal. And if you have a klal prat or klal, then charisha should be awesome midiraisa. You should get malchus for it. Mandamer loike shapir, because you have the klal prat or klal. Umandamer eina loike Amar loch. He will tell you, even though you have a klal prat or klal, which would include charisha, but the same svar we had before. Michti zmira bechlal zeriya uvitzira bechlal ktsira lamay hechzak izvinu. Even as a prat, why did we need those two prats? Those two prats are completely redundant. It must be the Meimar that Hani told us to the Mechayiv, but I told her loy Mechayiv, and therefore there would be no Chiyiv for Charisha. That's how Rashi learns. Tosfos doesn't like it for two reasons. A is, if you're not going to learn that it's a klal prat to klal, why would you learn that it's a klal prat? That's kasha number one. Kasha number two is, normally, whenever the Gemara says it's a machlokes, whether or not you agree with Reb Avin or not, the response is not going to be nobody holds like him. The Gemara is always going to try to say, oh, everybody can hold like him, and even according to him, there'll be a machlokes. But to say nobody holds like him, that's not really how the Gemara likes to do it. So because of that, Tosfos has another. He says if you're not darshaning it the klal prat to klal, then it's only a klal because it's completely separate, and then everything is included. So he learns fakir. If you hold over Avon Amar Rabbi Loi, then charisha will be aser because the klal will include everything, and you totally ignore the prat. And if you don't learn like Rav Avon Amar Rabbi Loi, then you learn into klal prat, and then it would exclude charisha. So then the Gemara answers very good. So the Gemara Ferzois, Ella dechula alma isle derabavin. So he changes the gish of the Gemara Tosfos, and he says, Loi dechula alma isle derabavin. Everybody holds that it's only a klal, and therefore it includes everything. So the mandamar loike is perfect because it's a klal that includes everything. And the mandamar ain't loike is because you have redundancy. You have two extra things. You have zimer and you have bitzira that are two extra things to tell you that you're only chayav for those and not for others. Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah. I think so. Unless I didn't misunderstood Tosfos. Yeah. I think that's what Tosfos. And there's another advantage to Tosfos as well, but that's a little bit later. Everybody agrees you would be over to say. Yeah, Bechar Shavakatra Tishbos. Right, because that's it. That's what Moshe was asking earlier. So it's a sure they're right, but it's in the same. It's not allowed. Right here. Okay, very good. Thank you for pointing that out because it's still lingering. I didn't have an answer for Moshe. I said, let's see later what happens. So what happened was, as Reb Shai brought up, that it's because it's Tisbar, it's only an assay, it's not a license. Okay, but it doesn't. The Rabban still can't waive that assay. So that doesn't explain how they can be makel if it's still that assay midiraisa. So there has to be a shita who's going to hold that Charisha is completely the Rabbanan, because like Reb Moshe is saying, if you hold that watering is Charisha, then you have to somehow say Charisha is Rabbanan, unless you make a difference between Shabbos and Shemitah. So Zok Gemara V'loi. So now we're having a repeat of the top of the Amud. V'loi, are you telling me that only these 4 malachas are also midaraisa on Shemitah and not others? And now we could rip through this because it's literally a repeat word for word of what we had earlier. V'tan yisod chalei sizra, v'kama chalei sizmar, ein li al zirua, ein li al zirua v'zimur, v'nayin li'idur, u'lekishkosh, u'lekisuach, tamad loimer sod chaloi, kama chaloi. Loi kol malacha shebesodcha, v'loi kol malacha shebekamacha. U'minayin shein makarsim vein nezardin vein mefaskin be'ilon, tamad loimer sod chaloi, kama chaloi. Kol malacha shebesodcha loi, kol malacha shebekamacha loi. Minayin she'ein mezabel vein mefarkim vein ma'ashlim ve'ilan. Tamad loimer sod chaloi kama chaloi. Kol malacha shebesod chaloi. V'chol malacha shebekama chaloi. Ya chaloi yakashu shtachas hazeisim. V'lo yada tachas ha'gefanim. V'lo yimali nikoy mayim. V'lo yasa ugiyos l'gefanim. Tamad loimer sod chaloi sizra. Zriya b'chlal hoysa. V'lama yatisa. L'hakashe le'a loy malach. Ma zriya miyuchedes avodah shebesod v'shebekerem. But I'll call upon him from this bride. It seems to be mashma that all of these activities are also midaraisa, and you want to claim it's only also midarabanan. And for the Gemara, the same as we said before, midarabanan. All of these are only also midarabanan. Ukra asmachta ba'alma. We're bringing a pasuk just for moral support, but avada, it's all only also midarabanan. So just to do a quick recap of this daf, what this daf basically said is there's strong support to argue that the only avodas that are usher with a lav midaraisa are zriya, zimur, kaitzer, and bitzira. That's it. Everything else will only be usher midarabanan, and therefore the rabbanan have the wiggle room to be able to be matter irrigating fields when it could lead to a hefsed muda. And there's also a tzad to say that it's deraisa, like we learned on the base. According to Rebbe, these malachas might be also deraisa, and the reason why they can be mekel is because we're talking about shemitah b'zman hazeh. Well, Eli was going to say that first. Why is it clearly a klal practical?
Usually that's the notion of the practical.
Which Vilama Yatus on the Gemara specifically are you referring to?
The same thing, the Gemara goes over.
Doesn't say Lama Yatus, it says Lama Yatus Kishvini Rachmana. Oh, you're at the bottom. The Lama Yatus Lahakashala Lamala. Right.
But this is clearly a cloud practical. So how do you?
That's not how that's not how Rabbi Avin is learning.
How do you learn that? It's not. It's normally up. So that's the.
He's learning that it's not a klal practical. That might be the same wording. That might be the same wording that you would see by a klal practical, but he's not learning it as a klal practical. He just learns this as an independent miyat. What were you saying? What Rashi on top says is that whatever was in the Mishkan, not in the Mishnah, the Mishkan. Right, but that's not true at all. You can see from our Gemara that that's not true, right? And that's the Marsha's Kasha. That's exactly what the Marsha's Kasha is. How could you, Rashi, say that it's totally the Malachas of Mishkan? You clearly see from this daf that it has nothing to do with the Mishkan because these don't follow the rules of Shabbos at all. That's precisely what the Marsha's Kasha is. Okay, Gavalti. Zok tehelig Gemara Vayter. Now we'll get on to Amud Beis. But basically, it sounded confusing, but really it was very simple. It's just listing of a whole bunch of malachas, and there's a discussion if it's deraisa or if it's derabon. Okay, Zok tehelig Gemara Vayter. Yosy Avdimi. When Avdimi came, Omar, he said, and this is again a repeat of what we just learned now, except it's presented in a cryptic fashion, and we're going to decipher the cryptic code that Avdimi heard, but it's going to be just a repeat of what we just learned. So it says Ki Aser Avdimi. When Avdimi came, so Rashi says he came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel. Omar, he said, Yochel Yilka Al Toisvis, you might think you would get Malchus for the extra. And he brought a right that you don't get Malchus for the extra. The problem is, V'lo Yadana, I didn't know what he was talking about. V'lo Yadana, my Talmuda, what exactly is this limud? My Toisvis, and what is the subject matter that he's talking about? So we had to probe. So Rabbi Lazar said he was talking about the exact subject that we just discussed on Amud Aleph. Charisha. Toisvis means Charisha. Why would Toisvis mean Charisha? So Rashi says, and I'm going to look at the third line from the top in Rashi. Rabbi Lazar Charisha. Charisha b'shviyish. Why is it called Toisvis? It doesn't say Beferish in the Torah. You learn it out of a klal, prat, uklal. So Rabdimi said, you might think that you get Malchus for Charisha, which you would learn out of a klal, prat, uklal. And then he said that the Gemara is maskona that it's pater. Why? If you hold like Rav Avin Amar, for sure you don't have a klal, prat, uklal. But the Gemara said, even if you hold like him, or if you don't hold like him, you still have a special miyut because it listed off those pratim, it didn't list off Harisha. So that's how we know you don't get Malchus for Harisha. Rabbi Yochanan said that this cryptic message that Rabdimi brought, has nothing to do with Harisha. Rather, it's talking about the days before Rosh Hashanah, which means the last couple of days of the 6th year, where you're also prohibited from doing malachas because of Shemitah that's coming next year. And we're going to get to details shortly. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, it's Yomim Shoysivu Chachamim L'fnei Rosh Hashanah. It's the days that the Chachamim said, even though we're not yet in the Shemitah year, we're still before Rosh Hashanah, there's prohibitions here as well. And this is what Rav Dimi meant. You might have thought that you get Malchus for the time even before the Shemitah year. And why would you think you get Malchus for before the Shemitah year? Why would you think there's an Isur D'Oraisa to do malachas that are prohibited on Shemitah even before the Shemitah year? The Asr B'Charish V'Katar Tishbois, you learn it from B'Charish V'Katar Tishbois. And how would you learn something like that from B'Charish V'Katar Tishbois? Zok Rashi, K'da Amar L'Kamon, like we're going to learn tomorrow, Me'eni Inyan L'Shviyis. When it says B'Charish V'Katar Tishbois, it can't be telling you a chiddush that you're not allowed to do agricultural work on Shemitah. You know why? We already have a pasuk that tells us what is prohibited on Shemitah. So why do I need another pasuk to tell you what is prohibited on Shemitah? Rather, Tneyu le'inyan shishish and nichnas l'shviyas. Let's say that this pasuk is telling us that midaraisa there's an iser to do agricultural malachas like charish and ktsira even before Shemitah year, even in the 6th year, heading into the 7th year. The beshishish nami also. So therefore, you would have thought that you get Malchus for it because it says B'Charish V'Katar Tishbois V'Nosav Lo Talmud Olav Torah, and the Gemara said that no, it's going to be Potter. There's no Malchus. Kidabinu Lamela. Come on, like the Gemara is going to explain shortly why we don't learn from B'Charish V'Katar Tishbois. So Rab Shai is going to ask me, how could you get Malchus for B'Charish V'Katar Tishbois? It's an essay, right? You brought that up earlier. It's an essay. So how do you get Malchus for B'Charish if it's an essay? So Tosfos comes to the rescue, and Tosfos says, Yochel Yiloka al Tosfos for Rosh Hashanah, Dim Timer Frek Tosfos, Malchus Minalan. V'loiksiv v'Tosfos Lav, Ela Asay Greda. It's only an essay. It says B'Charish V'Katar Tishbois. Zok Tosfos, Ikal Amemer, I can tell you as follows. The Mi B'Charish V'Katar, Mafkinon, the Tzarech Tosfos. All Charish V'Katar Tishbois is defining what falls under the prohibitions of Shemitah, of which it does say Aloy Saseh. Kloimar, Shashvius Mascheles Mishon Hashishis. All the Charish V'Katar Tishbois tells us is Shemitah starts earlier. Once Shemitah starts earlier, all of the lavin that apply to Shemitah will apply to this time as well. The Chaldin Shvius Yelishishis. This is what the pasuk is telling us. The Shvius, the year of Shvius, Maschelas Kodim Shana Shvius. It starts before the 7th year. And therefore it will have all the prohibitions that apply to Shemitah will apply to this time before as well. Of course, we don't say that, so Shai is right, it's only in a say at the end. Okay, Zok Gemara weiter. Ma Yomim Shalfnei Rosh Hashanah. We talk about days before, how many days, why, what is this all about? Ketnan we learned. Ad Mosai Chorshin Besada Ilan. A field that has trees growing in it, so we would call that an orchard. Until when can you plow in that field? Plowing benefits the field. Until how long can you plow before Rosh Hashanah Erev Shvius? As long as it's good for the parish that grew in the 6th year, you're allowed to plow. You know why? Because you're doing it to benefit the parish of the 6th year. But the moment you're plowing will not benefit parish that grow in the 6th year, you're not allowed to anymore. Because then it looks like you're plowing to benefit the 7th year. We still until Shavuos. Zok the Gemara, Ukroivin Divrei Elu, or the Tana says, Ukroivin Divrei Elu, Lioshka Divrei Elu. There's only a couple of days difference. Beis Shammai says maybe you start a couple of days before Shavuos to stop plowing, and Basil says Apol to Shavuos. So they're not really arguing about a big span of days. That's talking about a Sada Ilan. How long can you plow in a field where you plant like grain, things that you cut off, not like trees that remain forever? Erev Shvius on the 6th year, Mishatichla Halecha, from when there's no more rain. Because as long as there's rain, things can still grow. As long as people are still plowing to plant gourds and some other type of melons, the article probably says what they are, those grow in a very short period of time. So up to the wire, up to the last minute, as long as people are still planting these things from the 6th year, there are a lot of plow there. But once the rain season is completely over and the land is drying up, nobody plants anything anymore in the 6th year. Therefore, if at that point you plow, it seems like you're plowing for the benefit of the 7th year, and then it will be awesome. Rab Shimon said, if you're going to say it depends on when people plant until, that means you don't have a set rule. So it becomes a free-for-all. It becomes like the Wild West. That's not logical. Ella, we have to make hard dates, hard cutoffs. A field that you would plant wheat in or grain in that doesn't have trees in it, there the cutoff is Pesach. After Pesach, you can no longer plow. That's the Brisa. That's what the Shimon says, and basically he's sort of crystallizing what the Shammai and Basil said. Please.
The next year, a month, can you start?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know my Hilchos Shemitah properly. I'm happy. I just know Erev Shemitah. Maybe there'll be more about Matzah Shemitah later on. Maybe we'll learn it. So it's a good question.
Yosy, you keep saying it looks like. Is this an issue of Mars Ayin?
Let's look at Rashi. Avol mikan ve'elach. After the cutoff time, you can't plow anymore. The hava kimisaken perish shvius. So it's. I don't know if it's Mars Ayin. It's like you're being misaken perish shvius because you're plowing to be, even if when you're plowing you don't have specific kavana to be misaken perish shvius, but it's like you're misaken perish shvius. So I'm not sure how exactly to translate this, but it doesn't sound like it's Mars Ayin. It's like the activity that you're doing, plowing, when it's no longer relevant for the 6th year, it's you're actually benefiting perish shvius. Maybe
what's wrong with? What would be wrong with that? If if you're not going to eat it, but the Neem can come and eat it, and right, there are people that are going to eat those things.
Well, whatever.
As a matter of fact, you can eat it yourself.
He's plowing for something that's going to grow in the 7th year.
Right.
And you're not allowed to do anything to enhance the growth in the 7th year.
But why can't you argue just the 7th year you can't enhance it, but the 6th year?
That's a very good argument. The question here is, why is it usher? Is it a derabanan? Then you can ask me why usher. But if it's a deraisa, then it's not a question anymore.
Okay, so which is it?
That's what we're going to discuss right now. That's what we're going to get into, and it's very complicated what it is. The Gemara is going to go all over the place. It's going to go on to Amud Aleph. So if I'm Rabbi
You're,
Shimon ben
you're
Pazi,
allowed, you're allowed to eat Paris on Shvius.
that's right. You're just not allowed
You just can't, make a
work
business
on
out
it.
of.
You
But you
That's right.
can eat your own Paris on Shvius,
Right.
but you got to let everybody else eat it also.
That's right.
So
So
we
I'm
want,
tiny. Never mind, you want to plow. All the neem around there are egging you on.
Yeah.
Plow. So we'll all have good Paris next
right,
year.
right.
Yeah, I hear. If I'm Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, every other year they don't care, but this year Bedafka they care. If I'm Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi, I'm Rabbi Shimon ben Levi, Mishum bar Kapara. Rabbi Gamliel who based Dinoi, Rabbi Gamliel who came after Shammai and Hillel, he came along and relaxed everything. Nimnu al shnei prokam alalu ubatlam. They said no problem. You can plow up until Rosh Hashanah. Amalei Reb Zeir,
Yeah.
Rebo.
You see?
Yes.
Why would it, if there's no value in the plowing, so what would be the reason to be matir plowing? Like that's what purpose are they serving by being bevatel this decree?
That's a very, very good question. I'm going to get to that. It's a very good question. It's a very good question. So let's see. Amalei Reb Zeir Lebavo, V'amalei Rish Lakish Reb Yochanan, Rabbi Gamliel Bezdinoi, Heichi Motzim Mevatle Takanta de B'Shamai Besil. How could Rabbi Gamliel, who's later than B'Shamai and Besil, than Shammai and Hill, how could he just wipe out and nullify a takana of Shammai and Hill? But none we learned a very famous rule: Ein Bezin Yochel Avatel Divrei Bezdin Chaverai. One Bezin cannot just be Mavatel the words of another Bezdin. Ella Imkain Gadol Mimenu V'Chachmu V'Minyan, and that's not going to happen. So whether this conversation happened between Rabbi Shlokish and Rabbi Yochanan or between Rabbi Zeir and Rabbi Vo, the person who was questioned was stunned for a minute. Ishtoimim k'shachada. He didn't have an answer. How could it be there? Rabbi Gamliel will just wipe out the gzeira made by Shammai and Hill, and then he figured it out. Omerlei, Emer, let's say that kach hisnu b'nein, when Shammai and Hill made this takana that you have to stop plowing Pesach or Shavuos, kol haroitza levatel yavi v'yavatel. When they originally made it takana to stop plowing by Pesach or Shavuos, they made it with the condition that any later bezin has a right to be mevatel. So now let's get to what Rav Moshe asked. What's the benefit? The teretz is the reason why they built that into the takana is because based on today's technology, there was no reason to plow after Pesach or after Shavuos in the 6th year because there's no benefit from it. So therefore, they saw no reason to allow it because it seems like you're being misakin pairs for the 7th year if you plow after that date. But what if technology changes and they are able to find a way to plant and get a net pairs out of the 6th year by plowing? They wouldn't want to hurt the community. They want people to be able to have whatever they could have. Especially in the Shemitah year, it's hard enough not to plant for 1 year. To extend it further is not good. So they Bedavka built it in because maybe as technology develops, as the situation changes, there will be reason to allow plowing later on. So they Bedavka put it in the clause that, because you might ask, every other takana, they don't build it in. They built it in here because they knew there could be changes and they wanted future Batadinim to adapt the takana to meet those changes.
So what changed? So what changed?
I'm sorry? What changed? I guess they found some way that even if they plowed later, they would get things for the 6th year.
But the Gemara doesn't tell us that something changed,
The Gemara
right?
tells precisely what happened. That's right.
Even if something changed, Chazal make a takana, there's a light bulb. You can't change the takana unless.
But if they build it into the takana,
it's always there. Things change.
But if they build it into the takana, then they could, and they built it into the takana. So, Frank the Gemara, are you telling me that this whole concept is a derabbanan? David Zoldi didn't like that it should be a derabbanan because why? Is it their takana? Halacha l'Moshe Messinai. It's halacha l'Moshe Messinai. You see, David, that's the silver bullet. Whenever you don't have an answer, it's halacha l'Moshe Messinai. Halacha, because Mami said halacha l'Moshe Messinai. It's a halacha l'Moshe Messinai. So what do you mean it's their gzeira? And since it's not their gzeira, how could anybody play with it? It's halacha l'Moshe Messinai. Damar Rav Asi Amar B'Yochanan, it's a famous Gemara. Mishum Rabbi Nechunya Bikas Beis Chayrasan. Eser Netiyos Arava V'Nisa Chamayim Halacha l'Moshe Messinai. So Arava is that on the 7th day they go around all that those halachas we learned in Sukkah is halacha l'Moshe Messinai. Nisa Chamayim on Sukkah is also halacha l'Moshe Messinai. Eser Netiyos is Rashi tells us if you have 10 saplings that are spread out in a base saw that's 50 by 50, they're close enough together that it allows you to now plow the whole field for their benefit up until Erev Rosh Hashanah. So if I have a halacha l'Moshe Messina,
How do you
telling
have
me
such a havamina? How do you have a havamina that's Lachmash Sinai? Is this that's Beishamai Beisil? Well, you know it's Lachmash. Everybody knows Lachmash Sinai. How do we even have that havamina to ask that kasha?
well, let's hear the teretz first. When you hear the teretz, everything will make sense. So the Gemara says halacha l'Moshe Messina. If it's halacha l'Moshe Messina, these are allowed until now. Obviously, the halacha l'Moshe Messina is telling us that others aren't allowed. So we have halacha l'Moshe Messina. Rabbi Yitzchak. The halacha l'Moshe Messina only prohibits plowing 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. But also Hanu and Beishamai and Basil came along, Beishamai and Hill came along, and Tikon mepesach u'me'etzeres, and they said not only should you follow the halacha l'Moshe Messina to stop plowing 30 days before, stop plowing much earlier once there's no benefit in plowing for the 6th year. But in their takana, the asnu biditu, they put a tanai, a condition into their takana that kolaroitza levatel yave v'yavatel. Any future rav who sees a reason to be mevatel our chumrah because there'll be benefits, then we allow them to do that, and therefore we don't have a stira. So the halacha l'Moshe Messina is 30 days, and the Beishamai and Basil or Shammai and Hill extended it much earlier. Frank the Gemara. Is it halacha l'Moshe Messina? It's a pasuk as well. So now you see how it's going to get complicated because we're going to have to see what the pasuk says, what the halacha l'Moshe Messina says, and then what the Rabbanan say. Because it gets very limited. If not, we learned the charish of a kata tishbais going back to that pasuk. The charish of a kata tishbais. Rabbi Kiva Omer ein tzarich loimer charish v'ksir shel shvius. We don't need a pasuk to teach us about shmita. Shrek fine emar. We already know the halachas of shmita. Sat chalois Israel. The Kama Chalois Ismar. Ella, what is it referring to? Charish shel erev shvius shenichnas l'shvius u'ktsir shel shvius sheyatza l'maitzai shvius. That's what it must be referring to, which means the pasuk is already telling you that it's also to plow from before. And now to answer Reb Shaya's question, u'ktsir shel shvius sheyatza l'maitzai shvius. So you see, there are some things that are also even after shvius, meaning things that grew on Shemitah, so they're Shemitah produce, even though they're not harvested till after, they also have the restrictions of Shemitah. I think we should stop here, even though we're sort of in the middle of something, because we're not going to get out of something so fast. So let's stop here and we'll pick up here tomorrow, B'ez Hashem. What? You mean tomorrow night? Yeah, when Daniel's coming back? Okay, so Misham tomorrow night, 8:30. Yeah, tomorrow night, 8:30, we'll learn. B'ez Hashem. I just want to put there's a gewaltige noite Yehuda on this week's parsha. There's a gewaltige noite Yehuda on this week's parsha. We in the Haftorah, we had the story of Yael who sacrificed her marriage to save Klal Yisrael. So the question is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And there was a story that happened in the Noite Yehuda's times.
Was Yael Jewish? Was Yael Jewish?
No.
She wasn't Jewish? How do you know?
She married a Caney. That means that she's from Yisrael.
Well, why does the Gemara say that she became also for her husband?
Didn't she marry a Haber? Hever Akeni.
Haber. It does say that.
Yeah.
So the shaila is
What do you say, Yosy? She was Jewish or she wasn't?
Doesn't make a difference because the night
David says he wasn't Jewish. But the story happened was there was a group of people traveling, and they got attacked by a group of robbers, and they were going to kill everybody. So one of the women there, one of the Jewish women, was very pretty, so she seduced one of the head gangsters, and they went off into the side to have some fun. And in the meantime, as they were distracted, the whole group of people got away and were safe. So that was the shiloh that was presented to the Noid of Yehuda. I'm sorry? That's right. So why is this Shemaka relevant? Because we just learned this Sugya in Megillah. We learned, so it doesn't make a difference. So we just learned this Sugya in Megillah. Tosfos had a kasha. It says that Esther says, now that she's going up until now, whatever relation she had with Achashverosh, she was Kaka Olam, she was an Anusa. But now that she's trying to get into Achashverosh, now she's presenting herself to him. So now she'll become Aser when she's with him. So she said, right? And Rashi tells us that she's going to also her husband. If you remember, Tosfos there asked a phenomenal question. Why didn't Mordechai just give her a get? And then she would not have become also to him. So Tosfos answers, because it would have made too big of a tumult if there would be a get, and then Achashverosh would have found out, and it would have blown their plan out of the water. So he brings down that the Rashba says, I don't understand Tosfos' pshat. I don't understand Tosfos' pshat because the Rashba says over here that he could have still. I think he asked that he should have given a get even earlier. That's right. Sure, you need Adim for a get, but midaraisa, his own private little get would have worked. So at least protect her from the issue daraisa of an Esha Shish Shizinsa. So the Rashba says really Tosfos Kasha is still fair. So he brings down a very interesting thing. He says as follows: the Marik in a tshuva paskin that an Esha Shish who was mezana to save people, even though it's the right thing to do. Even though it's the right thing to do for saving people, she's still also l'bayla. And he brings a raya from Esther because Esther said, "Kasher avadati mi beis Abba, I'll also be avadati from my husband because now I'm usher." So you have a raya from there that it's usher l'bayla. Zokt the Noid Yehuda, who said she'll be usher l'bayla? Maybe not, because you don't have a raya from the Gemara b'Chalal that Esther became usher from Mordechai. Who said Esther ever became usher to Mordechai? Rashi says she became usher, but the Noid Yehuda is challenging him. Because I can verteich the Gemara in Megillah that we learned vividly where Esther did not become usher to Mordechai. What happened? He wants to say maybe what you could say is that maybe Mordechai in fact did give her a get. Maybe he did give her a get. And the Chasher Avati is he can't marry her again. Because if he marries her again, that's going to make a whole tumult. Chasher will find out. But maybe in fact he gave her a get and she was not usher to him. He just couldn't marry her again. That's what the Noid Yehuda wants to suggest. So he says over here, so therefore there wouldn't be that. And he said, that makes sense. Because think about it. Forget now that she was going into Achashverosh. Even when they were going to take her originally, why didn't he give her a get right there? Why didn't he give her originally a get where nobody would have known about it? Before she was even taken into Achashverosh's house, he should have given her a get. You're going to tell me it's Netza, so it wouldn't be usher anyway. But first of all, Eshes Kohen, if Mordechai was a Kohen, an Eshes Kohen becomes usher even if she's Netza. But even not that, he could have made it cleaner, right? It would have been much cleaner if he would have just given her a get right before Achashverosh took her in originally. Why didn't he do that? So he says it must be, that's what he wants, it must be that Mordechai did. It says it must be that Mordechai must have given her a get. And the whole problem is that he couldn't take her back. The problem is it doesn't fit in so good with Rashi. But then he says about this guf halacha sheyimuter la'eshes liznois berotzon to save people ain't a Torah. I disagree. Absolutely not. V'lo yosher be'enai. It's not right that what I saw masharisi be'ezu tshuva that I saw in the tshuva. Ulefi shani la'es atat b'kfar. Since I'm in a village now and I don't have access to my svarim, la'uchal lizkar be'ezu tshuva. I don't remember where I saw someone who allows such a thing to happen. It's saying that it's good that the woman was mazana. Uchamadumani, I think I saw it. She tshuva's beis Yaakov. I hope he's not mistaken. Otherwise, beis Yaakov would be very insulted, right? Men and women went on the road. The Kamalaim are arc listim, I guess the arc listim, like in the Joker and Batman, the place, like the worst of the worst, the super villain. Echad Basada im Chaburis listim, Shekamoisi Laharagas Kulam, the Kama Isha Achas Mehem, Isha Yafas Toyar Moed, Vischila Hishtadalamish, she started to seduce him, Roisha listim Bidvorim, Acha Pitasoy, Bechelkas Lashoina, Shin Avala, Benivala Labiyar Minatzad. By day came Yitzila as Baila, she saved her husband's life in Kol Nefashis along with the lives of all the people that were in that predicament. Upazak with Tshuva, Hahi, Sheshaper Abda, the Tshuva says she did the right thing. Umitzvah Rabba Abda, she did a huge mitzvah. Sheshedlosoi Lazeh, she seduced this killer, the Hatzal Nefashis, to save people. Rak, She'afal Pika, Nesra Al Baila. She's still also to her husband, but she did do a mitzvah. So if you write me Esther, and this Tshuva saver Beis Yaakov brought a right from Esther, that was the right thing to do. Bani Yomer Zok the Noid Yehuda, Kivin Shomer Razal, the whole misrapin, you're allowed to use anything to save your life with to heal yourself. Chutz me about Yizara V'Gila Rais Shvichas Damim. Imkain, kishem shem misrapin b'sholosh haveres halalu, just like you wouldn't be able to heal yourself from a physical machla with gilu arayis, kach ein matilon behem nefashis. Surely you're not allowed to use gilu arayis to save lives, even if you work for the Mossad. But oinas, the rachmana shari be'isha shakaka oilami, hanu she anusa al gufabiyah. That's if she's anusa. She seduced him. The ish of the ish shavim v'teharag v'altava. I had Esther do it. The Esther shiny. It could be to save all of Klal Yisrael, it might be allowed, but to save a small group of people, it would not be allowed. So I take back what I said about the Mossad, because in the Mossad it might be saving a whole nation of people. The ein lemeitin hatolos yichidim me'atolos Klal Yisrael minar v'adzokin m'hoydu v'atkush, and v'shem hayu b'yoros Mordechai, there Mordechai Paskin, the Beis Dinai in his bezin, and v'ulai b'ruach hakodesh. Could be there was even ruach hakodesh to make a special exception to allow that. So he goes on and on, but it's a murdik Yehuda. We should never have such childless chas v'sholem. But in those days. No. So why did it come up? Because the Meshech Chochmah, and if someone can look up the Meshech Chochmah, I don't know pshat of the Meshech Chochmah. The Meshech Chochmah is medayik from the fact that the Marik and everybody here in the Shuva only reads the Raya from Esther, not from Yael. And I don't understand what the Meshech Chochmah is saying. It's very the Meshech Chochmah, but he's making a difference. And he says that by Yael, the Lashon HaPasuk is she sold herself for him. So it seems like there's no Raya from her that you'd be usher, because she did more. She actively tried to be mizdavik with him. She actively tried to seduce him. Esther didn't. Esther just wanted to have a meeting with him that she knew it would lead to. But Yael actually engaged in the rebellion. So you don't have a right just because Yael became usher to her husband. Maybe Esther would not have become usher to her husband. So that's why from Esther that became usher, it's a bigger right. But if you look at the Meshech Chochmah, I don't understand exactly what he's saying. It was a little cryptic. Everyone should have a wonderful evening.
Before you go.
Yosy,
Yes.
you think somebody asked the Noid to be Yehuda a question?
I have no idea.
In these cases, you have to make a decision, a split-minute decision. It's not something that you go ask a shaila, petach. You have to make a split-minute decision. And to make a split-minute decision, geht man nicht fragen kashalos.
Yeah. That's right. And you can't tell the listener, wait a second, I gotta go afternoon.
Yeah.
What's the story tomorrow morning? 9 o'clock?
Tomorrow morning we're learning at 7, we're learning at 9, and we're learning 8:30 at night.
So what are you going to do tomorrow?
The same lot, Daf Dalet. I'm doing Daf Dalet 3 times.
And tomorrow night at 8:30?
Also Daf Dalet, but then I'll know it.
Where are you starting Daf Dalet at
We're
8:30?
finished tonight.
Tomorrow night at 8:30.
Yeah.
So I don't have to be here for 9 o'clock.
That's correct.
Come off
Okay.
I'm gonna come off with them.
Do you know that you, me, and Shlomi were in the Gemara today?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, well, Moshe wants to say something. Moshe, what were you saying?
Now take your time. I'll wait.
Okay.